Thank you for joining us here at UNC Charlotte with the Live Wire. I'm Lynn Robertson, and I am the Communications Director for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking with Dr. Larry Mellichamp, who is recently retired as Director of the Botanical Gardens here at UNC Charlotte. And we have a lot to talk about because there are a lot of exciting things going on in the gardens. It's springtime and we want to find out what's going on. So Larry, thanks for being here with us today.
I'm glad to be here, Lynn. This is a wonderful spring day and it was nice to get out and come over.
Well, you probably have already been digging in the dirt today.
I spent all morning digging. It was such a nice morning to work outside. I planted about a dozen native plants in my front yard, as I do, to see how they do.
Well, that fits right in with what we want to talk about today because we know that the gardens have continued to evolve. Let me tell folks a little bit about you, and then you can share some of your thoughts on that as well. So you've recently retired after almost 4 decades being head of our botanical gardens here at UNC Charlotte. And before that, you were a student.
I was a student. I graduated in 1970 and went away to graduate school at the University of Michigan. I was so fortunate to come back when Dr. Heckenbleichner retired and was hired here. So I've worked in these gardens as a student when they were first founded. When they were, helped plant some of the very first plants. So that's pretty special to me. Very rarely do you get to see a garden develop from the very beginning over all this time.
So when you think back to when you were a student and then in the early days when you first came on as a faculty member there in the gardens, what were the gardens like then? And maybe take us through time and how they've evolved.
Well, we didn't know what we were doing in the beginning. Our ideas changed as we went along. The garden was a woodland, and Dr. Heck had planted hundreds, maybe thousands of rhododendrons. Then he decided in the early 70s to start planting native plants of the Carolinas to create a teaching laboratory. So I thought that was wonderful. When I was at graduate school, I learned a lot about native plants and gardens and horticulture. So when I came back here were the Van Landingham Glen with all of its native plants, and so I knew pretty soon that I was going to be working with native plants and growing them and talking to people about that. So we just sort of kept whittling away. We would clear areas and plant plants and tried to plant whatever would grow. It was a test garden to see what would grow here. And in those days, there were no nurseries for native plants, so we had to collect our own cuttings and seeds from the wild, and very few that were available from nurseries. So it was an interesting time. Had no idea it was going to develop into a movement. The native plant movement, that is the growing of native plants for the homeowner, began about 1980, 83. And I was a part of that early movement. Started at the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference up at Western Carolina University when they had their first summer course on growing native plants. And people have just gotten more and more interested in that down through the years.
So now we're in the early 80s and the native plant movement has started. You're continuing, you and others with the gardens are continuing to propagate and try things, right? Doing some experimentation. What happens next?
Well, we started our plant sales, our annual plant sales started in 1977. I had a student, Bob Profit, who said, "Let's have a plant sale." And I said, "No, that's a crazy idea." But I let him have a plant sale. So in the spring of '77, we made $176 on our first plant sale. And I said, "Here's a source of money." So that was the beginning of our annual plant sales. And those sales became the outlet where we provided native plants to the public. There were no other sources of native plants readily available. So we started propagating natives. There are now 3 or 4 really good mail order nurseries and several others scattered around the region. But one of our big goals back then was to propagate, to make available at our plant sale native plants. So we were doing 2 things. We were making money for the gardens and we were making plants available to the public. And so that sort of drove what we were doing. We were bringing more and more plants into the gardens so that we had a bigger and bigger collection of natives to see what would grow and to see how they would grow, to show them to people, to use them in teaching, and then to propagate them for our plant sales. And so it was a multifaceted educational facility.
So it was all interwoven.
That's correct. Back in the 80s, and as these native nurseries came along, Woodlanders Nursery started about 1980. Niche Gardens in Chapel Hill, Plant Delights Nursery started in the 90s, and other nurseries came along. So more and more, the notion was catching on of growing natives. Right. But people would come out in the spring to see the rhododendrons and the azaleas, and by the 80s, they were also seeing more and more native plants. So it was an idea that was really catching on.
So when you think back to that time period, and in a minute let's talk about your books, because I know your books have also, especially the most recent one, have delved into native plants. Have you seen influence from what our botanical gardens and your work and your colleagues, the influence that it's had in the movement on native
absolutely.
plants? So tell us a little bit about that.
We were one of the few native plant gardens. The North Carolina Botanical Gardens specialized in natives in Chapel Hill. The Duke, Sarah P. Duke Gardens in Durham had a native plant garden that goes way back. But these were, not mainstream. It took a while for all of us to become a little more mainstream. There needed to be publicity. There needed to be discussions. There needed to be people talking more about it. And so that was going on. And so that was what I did in my career, was to talk about native plants. And I was part of all the Color Week conferences and gave public lectures and invited people to tour. And probably more than any other garden, I talked to homeowners about planting natives in their garden.
So why? Why is this important?
Yeah. There's several reasons. One is our native plants are beautiful, and they've kind of been overlooked here in the Southeast. We have wonderful native plants, and they've been overlooked because the mainstream nurseries have mostly propagated plants that have been in the trade for decades, many, but not all of which are from China and Japan and Europe. We do have some natives that are mainstream, the garden phlox, and monardas, and there's a few plants that are native. But we wanted to promote the southeastern natives because they're heat tolerant. Plants from the north just don't do well here in the south. It's too hot and humid. So we needed to develop more of our southeastern natives to grow in gardens. Second, native plants help support native animals. And people are getting more and more interested in butterflies, hummingbirds, and those critters need our native plants, especially for their larval food plants. Butterflies need to eat native plants to develop, especially the monarch butterfly. It's kind of the poster child of a native insect that needs native plants for food, because the milkweeds they eat just don't grow anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And on top of that, I wanted to promote a sense of place. Plant southeastern natives, be proud of the Southeast, be proud of American plants, show off our showy native plants, and have more of those in your yard. Our natives can't solve all landscape problems, but they can do a lot, and they can add to the garden, and they help us fit in better with the web of life, which is where the birds and the bees need the flowers and the trees, and native plants fit into that a whole lot better than foreign plants.
And bringing in. So several thoughts come to mind. I want to talk about the book, but also talk about the new gardens that we are getting ready to invite people in. Of course, it's people have been able to enjoy it,
right.
But we're going to have a grand opening and ribbon cutting coming up on Sunday, May the 31st,
right.
from 4 to 6 p.m., which is open and free to the public, and we invite folks to come. And for more information on that, they can visit the Botanical Gardens website, which would be gardens.uncc.edu. But we'll remind folks of that toward the end of the program. But let's talk a little bit about how you came to realize why we needed this kind of garden, which is, you're going to be too modest to say it, but is the Mellichamp Native Terrace Garden.
Right. Lynn, it's a unique garden. In 2010, when Timber Press approached me about writing a book on native plants of the Southeast, I accepted. I thought about it, and I realized...
And we have your book here,
here's
of course.
the book. I've been growing these plants for 35 years and learning about them, seeing them in the wild, seeing them in the garden, propagating them, showing them to people. And I thought, as I write this book, it would be nice to have a garden where I could go to see how the plants were grown for homeowners. And I could not find a single botanical garden in this region, in the East, that showed homeowners how to use native plants to solve everyday homeowner problem. Foundation plantings, border plantings, rain garden plantings. Everybody has to have a rain garden these days to catch water runoff from hardscapes. You need to use native plants in those rain gardens. Gardens for plants for beauty, plants for your rock garden, ferns for a fernery, wildflowers for a woodland stroll, flowering trees and shrubs. Yes, all these plants are known, but where can you go see them for inspiration to get immediate ideas? Like you go to a showroom to see furniture, you ought to be able to go to a garden and see plants arranged in a useful manner for the homeowner. So many botanical gardens have native plants. They're lined up in a row or planted in groups, or they're in ecological arrangements, but they're not there purposely for the homeowner. So I came in one day in either late 2010 or early 2011 and told Paula Gross, our assistant director, I said, "Paula, we have to develop a new garden." And I think she was somewhat excited, although it was a surprise to her. She almost never said no when I came in with ideas, because they always turn out to be trouble, but they're always good things to do.
Right.
Our Asian garden and so forth were all good things that we did. But they require resources and planning and execution and getting money. And so this native plant garden, I said we need to use our terrace, which we weren't using for anything important, and turn that into a display garden for native plants for the homeowner. So she didn't discourage me, and so I began thinking about it, and we got Ed Davis, a local landscape architect, involved to help design it and plan it so that we could maximize the impact, because it's a small garden. And by golly, it turned out to be what you're going to see on May 31st, a fabulous little garden of native plants from all over the region, and how they can be used in the homeowner landscape. And so people should come and see throughout the season how the plants grow and bloom. And what was amazing last summer was the tremendous number of insects that came to these flowers. It was just an amazing maze of insects, bees and native bees, honey bees and native bees and butterflies coming to all of these plants in the summer. It was a maze of activity, and that was great. And so we're using this more for teaching our children's programs, to be able to show children the insects interacting with plants and have these right at our fingertips growing in habitats.
And so the goal of this garden, as well as the other gardens, and we should not neglect the greenhouse as well, which is another teaching opportunity both on campus and the community. But this particular garden, you mentioned homeowners. So they're, the garden as well as your book speak to the homeowner in the Southeast region?
Yes, that's subtitle, A Comprehensive Guide to the Best 460 Species for the Garden. And so these are not highway roadsides, these are not municipal plantings, they're not naturalistic plantings. We're trying to get more people to plant natives in their home, whether they have a woodland area, whether they have formal plantings, whether they have a sunny border, and maybe they want to have less lawn and they want to create a rock garden. It's amazing the plants in the Southeast here that can be chosen to plant to give an unusual and a new perspective on how to grow natives in your backyard. we all know most of our forest trees, most of our shade trees are native trees. And we know that flowering dogwood and redbuds and a few other trees provide attractive small trees. But there are many, many more. There's just a great deal of plants we could branch out and utilize if we knew more about them and if nurseries would grow them.
So maybe speak for a second, if you would, about you mentioned rock, using rock in the garden, and then also you hint at biodiversity, and sustainability comes to my mind.
Sustainability, of course, is a buzzword, and that sustainability could have many aspects. It could be dealing with rainwater, water runoff. How do you handle runoff? It could be dealing with minimizing use of pesticides. So if you have native plants instead of a lawn, right there you have a simpler, you've simplified your need to do all of those things you have to do to a lawn to keep it growing. Lawns are not very natural places, and it takes a lot of water and chemicals and fertilizer to keep it looking good. So we say convert your lawn to something else, to a wildflower meadow, a little woodland garden, a rock garden, and that makes it more sustainable in that you're using fewer resources to keep it going. Plus the fact that we're helping native butterflies and hummingbirds, which...
And you mentioned bees, honeybees.
Absolutely, honeybees. As you know, bees are in danger. There are many things that hurting the honeybee population in this country, not the least of which is loss of habitats, loss of flowers, overuse of pesticides, and things like that. So anything the homeowner can do to create a little island, a little ark of wildflowers to help the birds and the bees find a place to settle, to come for food, to make a home, makes us feel good, makes them feel good, and we see something green instead of colorful flowers and green leaves rather than hardscape. This seems to be the trend. More and more people want to do this sort of thing. It's been difficult to get natives into the mainstream nurseries because they're a little more difficult to propagate. So getting natives is a little more difficult.
But they can get them at our plant sales.
They can get them at our plant sale. They can get them at the Winghaven plant sale.
Right.
They can go to these mail order nurseries. The plants are absolutely available, and the master gardeners are doing more. So this is all part of what I see as a movement, a grassroots movement, no pun intended, to get more people knowledgeable about native plants and to plant them and try them and learn about them and enjoy them. Right. And I'm not a purist. I don't mind half the plants in my yard are non-natives. I believe in using the right plant in the right place. But I just think our natives deserve more attention, not the least of which aims at providing food and nectar plants for insects and butterflies. For example, our spice bush butterfly has to have a spice bush tree for its caterpillars. The zebra swallowtail, probably our most beautiful native butterfly, needs a pawpaw tree for its caterpillars. If you don't have a pawpaw tree nearby, you don't have those butterflies. Milkweeds, of course, are the unique foods of monarch butterflies. And I can go on and on all day of butterflies that need specific plants. And so the more of those we plant, the more butterflies we have.
So, two things. You're also talking very much about education. I know you've answered a lot of questions throughout your career, as have others with the botanical gardens. The plants you reference, we can learn more about that in your book, I'm sure, and so learning more about that. But butterflies, why do we care? Why do we care about butterflies? And then talk about education with the gardens and how the Botanical Gardens approaches that with the public.
Our future is with children. We need to get children interested in nature, children interested in plants, children interested in butterflies, and that's not too hard. We have workshops 2 or 3 times a month for children out at the gardens.
Very affordable.
Yes.
Just a nominal fee to cover supplies.
Yes, just enough to, because we want kids to come. You got to get kids involved. we old folks are already set in our ways. We've messed up the planet. That's up to the future generations.
But no, they're going to come on May 31st, and they're going to learn
right.
all about it. And
That's right.
Yeah, right. But anyway, back to the
children. So it's for children, and butterflies are beautiful. They flit through the garden. They don't sting you. They don't bite you. They'll land on your hand. Butterflies are like flowers. They're brief. They're beautiful, and we don't see them enough, and so we want to see more of them.
Are they an indicator, too, of the health and vitality of our Earth?
They are. All of the insects, the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, they're all part of what we see. There are lots of other insects that we don't see, but the butterflies are kind of the poster child of beauty and nature and interacting with nature. And so to have those butterflies, you have to have their food plants for their caterpillars. And that's where natives come in. And so that's the notion we have to get across to children. If you want to have the pretty butterflies, you've got to plant things for them to eat, and then have to plant things for them to get nectar from. And then you'll have them in the gardens. We've had years down in the gardens here in midsummer where we had to walk through and push the butterflies out of the way in order to walk by. We've had swarms of butterflies.
Oh, wow.
That has not been true every year. Some years have been devoid of butterflies, and those are sad years. The years we don't see a monarch, those are sad years. It's like something's missing. And so we sense that something is wrong. And we hear about polar bears and we hear about pandas. Now we're starting to hear more about hummingbirds and monarchs and other butterflies. The monarch, I guess, is our butterfly that tells us that things are not quite right.
So we can all do our own little part by reading your book. Absolutely. And coming to the...
Well, there's a movement now for the monarchs. Planting milkweeds for monarchs is a movement that began out in the Midwest, and we can absolutely do that here by planting more of those kinds of food plants for them in our own home gardens.
So the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens exists as an educational resource here at the state's Urban Research University. Also, there is a need for additional funding for the gardens.
Sure.
We mentioned the plant sales, and I know the terrace garden also, there's a goal to raise some funds to continue to grow it, to be the showcase.
Well, the gardens started as a laboratory for the classroom, an extension of the classroom. And then we began to bring in the public more with tours, and in 2008 we began our Certificate of Native Plant Studies, where we teach weekend classes and workshops for adults to learn more about native plants. The part of all of this are our plant sales, our classes, our tours. We try to do as much as we can with university classes as well. And in the gardens, when we want to do something, we have to raise the money to do it. We don't get very much money from the state. We get some. So when we want to start a new garden, we appeal to people for funds, and we write for grants. The new Mellichamp Native Terrace garden, we got tens of thousands of dollars of grants to start out with. Our first grant came from the North Carolina Native Plant Society. This was fabulous. They are a statewide group that supports efforts like this. Then we got money from the Stanley Smith Horticulture Trust in California. And then individuals. During the calendar year of 2014, I'm extremely proud to say we raised over $150,000 with money from our supporters, our local citizens.
Who saw the value of the
Who saw the value of what we were doing, who liked what we've done, who've seen that we use money to
and use it wisely.
And we have good projects. We carry it out, and we reach people. And so we're very, very, very proud of that support that we've gotten. It shows that people trust us and have seen what we've done. And so it is all about education and trying to be very broad and bring in people to the campus to the gardens to see what we're doing. And we have folks who come from all over the state, really, from the Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham area, and Greensboro, Winston-Salem area. Come down here. It's less than 2 hours for most of those folks. Right. They'll come to programs and workshops. So we try to emphasize plants, of course, that will grow in this region. We don't sell anything that won't grow in this region of the Piedmont.
So we have just a couple minutes more. So I'm going to remind everyone of when our open house is for the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens. So it's on Sunday, May the 31st at 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock. We have free parking. We also will have guided tours of the gardens, and folks can also go on their own tour of all the gardens.
I'll be there to show folks around. I believe my photographer, Will Stewart, who took so many of the wonderful pictures in my book. Boy, Will went to the ends of the earth to get pictures of these fabulous plants, a lot with insects on them.
Right.
So he's been an important part of my work here, because he'll find things in nature and ask me about them, and that'll prompt me to bring that into the
So he brings photographs back and says, "Larry, look at this.
Exactly, or he'll find something new that I didn't have on my list, and so it brings it into the list, brings it into the community.
So he'll join us also. We're hoping for the.
That's correct. So we'll all be there to meet and greet folks. And
so you'll be there, but when you're not there, because you still are a volunteer now with the gardens.
Yes, I have retired. I'm trying to qualify to be a volunteer. We have stringent volunteer requirements.
So they're testing your knowledge,
yeah,
or
well, they're trying to see if I can come on the same day and be on time, things like that, because you have to be part of a group,
right?
To where we have a very active volunteer program now.
Well, we're going to have to talk to somebody about that and see if we can get special consideration.
Because I want to help take care of this garden, and we have a new horticulturist. We'll be hiring a new director pretty soon.
Right.
And we have a great future with this garden and the Susie Harwood Garden, which is a garden of native and non-native ornamentals. The Van Landingham Glen is a 7-acre garden of all natives and the rhododendrons. And then the McMillan Greenhouse, where our carnivorous pitcher plants are. We're very famous for those. So we try to touch on all aspects of native plants and all aspects of education, and try to have things that people would be interested in seeing, and show them how they fit into this web of life we talk about, and how we fit in with that as well.
Well, Larry, I would say we look forward to seeing everybody, and we thank you very much for being here with us.